Yeah, and so you've gone through this experience where you've died. You've dealt with what I believe to be, your own individual crises, and you've resolved them in these coma dreams. You've reached a point now where your heart is healed. You see through different eyes. How did you interpret the coma dreams and what that really meant to you?
Well, it wasn't until my sister started, putting two and two together and saying, wait a minute, Barb, when you're telling me about this coma dream, I remember, Dino and I were in the room and we were actually saying this to you. And that's when I realized, oh, wait a minute, kind of what was going on in the coma dreams definitely reflected what was going on in the room. Especially after the angel experience, the rest of the coma dreams, it seems like I was closer to coming out of the coma. I may not have been in such a deep sleep, so what I was hearing on the outside world was really affecting the rest of those coma dreams, where the first coma dreams, I was very deep, I guess, at a much deeper level. And I would say at some point I believed I was in the spiritual realm. I don't even think I was in my body anymore, especially when I experienced the Satan, the deal, and the visit with the angel in God's waiting room.
I agree, and I think what's fascinating about your story is these parallel things, the sensory input that you're getting, even in a coma, of the things that are going on around you, what people are saying, who's visiting you, what the nurses are doing, taking that in. But then what's going on in your dream is the resolution of some of these critical life conflicts to the point where you resolve it and you are healed.
Yeah. Well, Howard, then I met you, and, through just talking about the book with you, somehow you put together the subconscious, how that, how unresolved issues have been locked up in my subconscious. So, there was a few things happening. One is obviously the stimulus from what was happening in the room affected and triggered the coma dreams, but it was my subconscious that had, I guess, all the secrets of my past or unresolved issues all trapped. And so it was a combination of things happening. So, through discussing the book with you and you pointing out a number of things, it sort of brought about a healing process, because I could see that there was definitely a process here where we could look at, my insecurities as a woman and see that it actually stemmed from what was drilled into me at a young age. And,
Yep.
The beautiful thing is that the story that we tell ourselves, but that story, that dialogue, that narrative, it can be changed. We are not stuck with the narrative that we bring with us from childhood. And through understanding that, we can create a new narrative and we can change our thinking.
I think as you're telling your story, Barb, the thing that strikes me is there was two miracles. And the first is that your heart was healed, but the second is your career was taken away from you. And so it's like you couldn't actually go back into something that wasn't serving your getting out of having to be that perfect woman. And I just think lots of people wouldn't position it that way necessarily, but I do see there's some funny anecdotes of people saying, when they're trying to lose weight, that God will always make sure you burn the toast. so you don't want to eat it anyway. and I had a little parallel thing in my life, being a personal trainer and being in fitness for many, many years, and I was the perfect woman at one point, and then God gave me the gift of having broken feet, and that you then right away go, well, I can't go down the path. So there's an abrupt change, and then how you manage that or negotiate that in your head to turn it into a miracle of, wow, God's given me this real other clear path that I must take a different route.
Yeah, and I will say for the first 6 months, I was in despair a little bit because, who am I? I was always defined by being a rendering artist, and we were treated like rock stars, and we were paid like them as well. We were probably some of the highest paid artists in the world. So, I had this great life, and I was into fitness as well. I worked very hard on achieving a beautiful body, and I really tried to look like a Barbie doll, so to speak. And the world was sort of handed over to me on a silver platter. So now, who am I? What do I have to offer? If I can't be a rendering artist, then how am I going to make an income? Who's going to want me? And, it's funny because I had been praying before this incident that God would make change in my heart, because I could see I was going down a slippery slope. I could recognize that I was working very hard to maintain a certain lifestyle and to maintain a certain image. And, I kind of knew it was shallow because I was always empty inside. And I was praying for God to show me how I could change my life and find value in my life. And, this may have been how God changed my life.
Well, there's no question about that. I guess we have to be careful about what we pray for, but I'm stunned. I know the story. I've worked it with you. We've talked about it. We've written about it. It's still, to me, an incredible story about mind, body, soul, psyche, how all of that comes together at this crisis. And you said something that was really important about we all have these narratives we carry around, and it takes something really dramatic for us to change them. And in some ways, we're all wandering around in a bit of a coma, stuck with that same narrative. And your journey out of it to something different is truly remarkable. And for the listeners, I will tell you, we have doctor statements that say this was, as far as I can say, as far as they could tell, this was a miracle. That all the other patients they had with this virus either died or needed a heart transplant. And the fact that you came out of it the way you did, they cannot explain it. So I think that's really important. So when we come back after the break, here you are. You see through different eyes, metaphorically and literally. You have a healed heart, metaphorically and literally. and the question's going to be, I know there's a period of rehabilitation as you get over this crisis. The question's going to be, what do you do with that? What did you do with that new vision? What did you do with that new heart? How did this transform your identity? How did this transform your narrative? And how did this transform your life? And we're going to hear this incredible story continues from Barb Morello about how she took an experience of being in a coma and how it changed her life.